Welcome to They Are Waiting for Us from Forbes Books, the podcast that explores how education can transform lives and communities, featuring conversations with change agents who are making a difference in education, from parents and advocates to teachers and leaders. Here's Dr. Lisa Andrew.
Well, hello, and welcome to my first podcast, They Are Waiting for Us. I'm really excited to spend time with all of you and to share thoughts about today's educational system, the way that we can support it, and the way that we can support the change that needs to happen so that all students can have access and opportunity to a bright future. My very first guest today is a leader who's dedicated his career to transforming some of the most challenged schools and districts in the country. Dr. Derek Mitchell is the CEO of Partners in School Innovation, an organization that helps educators build their capacity to serve students from historically marginalized communities. He is a visionary, a strategist, a collaborator, and a learner. Derek, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm really pleased to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here as well. So let's first start with, when did you know you wanted a career in education?
I think very, very early in my childhood, it was clear that I was hyperverbal.
I would agree with that with what I know about you.
And my mom thought I would be a teacher or a preacher. And so I kind of started along the preacher angle, but quickly got a bit disoriented and disappointed by how much what they say doesn't match what they do, and pivoted early to the teacher space. My mom claims that I was always going to be a teacher. Once I started school, my elementary school teacher changed my name, and I came home calling myself something different.
Oh, goodness.
And she said, "Derek, what are you doing? Your name's not Roderick, it's Derek." And I told her the teachers thought that Derek was short for Roderick, and I figured she's the teacher, so she would know. So somebody may not have told me my full name was Roderick.
Interesting.
And so
Interesting
my mom
about
tells
identity,
Yeah,
identity,
that,
how people want to project onto you, right?
That's right. But she said that, the fact that I cared so much and believed so much in what teachers did, even as I was starting in school, she knew I would be a teacher in the education work.
Great. So I think we both kind of have the same blood going through our veins a bit here. And one of the reasons I get up in the morning is the belief that we are preparing the students of Silicon Valley to become the workforce of Silicon Valley. How did your experience in software development inform your approach to education reform?
I got into software development in education specifically because I was a poorly prepared teacher for the diversity of kids' needs in my classroom. I was really good with the students who were right in that center place, ready to learn and motivated, but I didn't have anything for the students who were, barely able to read, or for the kids who knew more about English and history than I did.
Right.
And I thought software would be able to help me understand and accumulate more information about what the kids need ahead of instructional time, so that I can take those needs into account and kind of design some better processes. And so the most important contribution, I think, in my education around technology was really about assessments, the ability of just-in-time dipstick measures that teachers can use with students to really get a sense of how much they know before you begin an instruction around the content, and maybe to check their understanding as they leave the room. Really good use of those kind of measures enabled me to improve my instruction dramatically, but there were real gaps too in the technology. So most of the content was not culturally respectful, and so there was need to correct some pieces that do that. And many other tools that were built on, kind of the old mental models of norming against, essentially white men, made it pretty clear that there was a little bit of a bias embedded in some of the material sets. And so developing new assessment structures that actually tapped and leveraged what kids brought from their cultures, from their families into the work, and then inform teachers to strengthen their grounding in that work, was really what I was excited about in the ed tech world.
Yeah. I love this, the idea that you're sharing about a software tool really enhancing the art of teaching and really wanting to start where students are at so that you can serve all students, right?
Right.
And making
Right.
sure that tools can help with that, but still the need for that human touch to know where to go with the student and how to go. So that's great.
There's a lot of tropes about the educational enterprise that simply aren't true, and they've really never been true, but they've never really been investigated or interrogated. And one of them is that every kid is ready at the same levels at the same time. Just because they're in third grade, that they're all ready to learn fourth grade, and that's almost never true. And so, to create tools that enable teachers to be more adaptive and responsive to the kids they currently have, as opposed to this mental model that we're all holding, that every kid moves at the same rate and is ready at the same time. Those are just nonsensical beliefs.
I think it's interesting that as an adult, when I enter into a space and if I'm learning something new, it's like, okay, I expect the instructor to help me, meet me where I'm at and make sure that I learn what I want to learn. Whether I'm, learning a new computer system or I'm learning I went to a new boba shop yesterday and they had this whole new system of how you didn't walk up in order. They had all these computers and the screens. And I'm like, whoa. I have no idea what's happening here. I expected them to come out and meet me where I was at. Right. And the gal behind the counter, looked at me like, what's wrong with you? Like, there's the screen. You go up to the screen. You're supposed to know what to do on the screen. So yeah, as adults, we have this natural, hey, come help me, meet me where I'm at, help me so that I can be successful in this environment. And so it shouldn't be surprising that the student should and want the same thing and that should be provided. So I know that at Partners, you introduced a notion that continuously improving an unfair system isn't enough. That continuous school improvement needed to have a racial equity lens. So I'm curious, how did you come to that realization?
One of the ways is in looking at the state assessment data systems that many of our district clients are struggling to succeed against. It was fairly clear early on that we could help all our schools make progressively incremental results against those systems. But that to do transformation work, the systems themselves needed to change. They needed to be more culturally respectful. They needed to be more adaptive to how kids learn and how they demonstrate knowledge. Essentially, we're prioritizing just one way of knowing and reflecting what we know in those systems. And humankind is more diverse than that. And the assumption is that, if a student can't demonstrate in that particular methodology, then there's something wrong with them, that they're not ready, that they don't know, that they can't achieve. And you and I know from our experience that that's never true. There are lots of ways you can get at what students know. And so making incremental improvements against a system that has built-in biases against kids who don't have a lot of money at home, or kids who speak a language other than English, or kids who are recent immigrants, or kids who are African American. Making incremental improvements in those systems is good because each one means some kids are better able to read and to achieve. But our aspiration is for all kids to be able to achieve. Every single one, right? The stubborn one, the mean one, the violent one, the one whose parents are totally disconnected, the kid who's homeless. The list goes on and on. Our aspirations for every single one of them to have a transformational, powerful educational experience so that they can reach their potential. If that is true, and if that's really what we're about, then our systems can't only prioritize one way of demonstrating knowledge. They have to be more responsive, adaptive, diverse than that. And so at Partners, we work really hard to help our schools and district partners understand the need for more robust and responsible and responsive way of knowing.
Yeah.
And that's in all content areas, right? The research is clear about, project-based learning and having students demonstrate what they know rather than just regurgitate it. Those kind of strategies take more time, more attention, more training for teachers. And frankly, it's easier to just, put a ditto sheet in front of kids and expect them to kind of figure it all out.
Yes.
But we got to get away from the easy, hitting the easy button on instruction, because, kids are more powerful, more adaptive, more capable than what those ways of expressing can capture.
Yes. So in that vein, due to our STEM equity focus here at the Silicon Valley Education Foundation, we were very interested in the adoption of the new California Math Framework by the State Board of Education last week. So the new framework claims to have an equity-focused approach and stresses no tracking. And it really goes into the things that you were just talking about. More than one way to get at something. Students bring different lived experiences and different capital to the classroom. So how can we tap into that to help them to learn new concepts? So how does this adoption align, or maybe doesn't align, with your continuous school improvement approach?
One thing that makes partners a little unusual for reform support organizations is that we don't choose for our partnerships what they prioritize, right? They do. And that's because we don't believe you can build leadership by making people followers, by taking from them the choices that they have to make and live with, right? Part of the challenge in having an approach that's essentially content agnostic is that we lean into the way in which we do things, the intentionality in which we execute, implement, adopt, deliver, assess, and reflect. Our district clients are finding those new standards very challenging to implement and execute from a bunch of perspectives. From one perspective, the whole question of where algebra rests has become a huge challenge and storm of conflict, where, some families feel like it should be really threaded all the way through the instructional space, but, concentrated in 7th and 8th grade so that, kids are more likely to be able to get access to the higher level math coursework in high school. Others feel like you're setting kids up to fail if they haven't been able to be properly prepared for those courses at that point in time. And so it should be really threaded all, into the high school experience. And the state curriculum is pretty clear about it. And so helping our clients think about this conundrum in a way that allows them to be appropriately compliant with what the expectations of the state are, but that adapts to where their kids' needs are so that they can accelerate where they need to and build greater capacity of their teaching force to teach adaptively and responsibly. It's a really, every curricular adoption, every adoption of a set of standards creates the same sort of spin, right? The same question of how does this match with what we're currently doing, and what do teachers need to know differently in order to do this better? And, and how do we know this is better than what we've had before? When you talk to master teachers, they'll, lean back and cross their arms and say this too will pass. We've gone through this 6 times now, and so we know what kids really need to know, and we're going to kind of do what we think they really need to know. But you and I know that students haven't been superlatively successful, at least not the students we're organized to help districts serve. Those who are challenged by poverty and intergenerational racism. And so we keep front of mind that something needs to be better in order for the kids to be better served. And maybe this adoption is an opportunity to reflect more powerfully about how to better serve students where they are. And that's generally where my staff takes the work.
So in your educational experience, when you were in school, were you tracked? Did you have access? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I was tracked in a number of different ways. Just to lay it out there, I am not for tracking. I think tracking locks kids into and out of different opportunities. And I say into because if you're tracked into the sort of achieving core, you generally meet with better academic outcomes. The challenge with tracking is that it locks kids into a particular frame that may or may not be right for them. And it assumes effort is less important than ability. All of our experience in education suggests the opposite. My experience was really unusual, and it's integrated with racism. So be prepared on that front. My early education experience, all the way through third grade, was in a school near the suburb of Chicago that still had white people in it. So you might remember that there was a period of time when white people were kind of fleeing the urban centers. And because this neighborhood is near the suburbs, it still had sort of mixed families in it. And the school was Francis Scott Key was the name of it. And it was a really high performing elementary school, very diverse, very effective teaching, and really nice and inclusive experience. I even remember being Louis Armstrong in the school play. First time I saw a real trumpet.
Wow.
But we moved into a neighborhood that I like to describe as 120% Black in Chicago's West Side, and went to a new school, middle of my third grade year, this place called Robert Emmett Elementary. And Emmett was pretty much the opposite. All Black students, mostly white teachers, which means they're driving pretty far to come to teach here, which is an interesting question on its own right. I've been there about a month before my experience with standardized testing starts. My very first sitting down for the hour test of basic skills. I don't know if you remember that, ITBS. Right. And I had never taken a standardized test before. I didn't even know what to do. And I'm sitting there, trying to figure out what all this is about.
Like me at the boba machine.
Exactly. And I missed the training. They had done a training earlier in the year, and I had missed it. So I basically screwed up the first sheet by bubbling in and making diagrams, and because I think it was a puzzle of some kind. And
yeah,
the rocker comes around, is like, "What are you doing?" No. He gets a blank sheet, he brings it and lifts it up and goes, "Oh, there's a worksheet with questions under there."
Yeah.
So I took this test, and several months later, the results come back, and I had tested 7th grade proficiency at 3rd grade, according to the ITBS. What the school interpreted that to mean was that I was ready for 7th grade work. Not even close to what that means.
Right.
That meant that if a 7th grader took the 3rd grader's test, that's how the person would perform. Anyway, the school started bouncing me around, trying to find a class to challenge me. And I ended up landing in an 8th grade classroom where I got, beat up just about every day.
Yeah.
And forced to do other people's homework. And then eventually, the principal took pity on me and put me in a classroom that was an overflow classroom with a mixture of 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders. And I was in that classroom for the next 4 years.
Wow.
With the same teacher for the 3 of those 4 years. And I have to say, she was consistent in her inability to teach. She had one of those panafolds that opened up, and she had the lessons for every week in sequence. And that's what she did.
Yeah.
Week 1 lessons, week 2 lessons, week 3 lessons. And so by the time I was in her classroom for my 3rd year, I was taking tests from memory. Like, what were the 4th week's words? To spelling. I was writing down on my way to school, selling, the answers to my classmates. Classmates changed every year, but I didn't. So it was me and this teacher, pretty much each of those years.
Yeah.
But the school believed I was smart. And so in addition to the work in that class, the principal would sign me up for other things, science fairs. I started the first school newspaper. I was interested in photography. So she had the photographer down the street apprentice me for a while. And so I was getting all this extra attention and basically following my own questions, my own inquiry. And I, to this day, feel like what the principal did for me is something that should have been done for every kid that was there.
It's interesting because you have this dichotomy going, right? You have this tracking, acceleration, enrichment, somebody meeting you where you're at, going to your interests, someone saying, no, this is what I do. I'm just going to repeat, rinse, wash, repeat. It's like you had all of these things at play with folks just trying to figure out, how do we meet the student where they're at? How do we ensure that a 3rd grade chronological, but academically 7th grade, who even knows where you were emotionally and socially,
Right.
And just, what do we do with this student in order to, it sounds like there's like just a mix that happened to you of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to me, what I learned from that experience is the power of these assessments.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, to shape the life of a kid. I mean, maybe I answered those bubbles randomly. Who knows? I mean, I can't tell you what I did with them, but whatever I did, that changed the course of my life.
Right.
Because the principal had a different perspective about what I was capable of and would spend extra time, energy, and effort making sure that my curiosity and my questions and the things I wanted to learn, and I had opportunities that other kids didn't have.
Right.
Of course, socially, I became the principal's pet.
Right.
And ended up with, getting a lot of blowback from my peers around.
Yeah.
But it ended up working for me because that final year, a new teacher came in. The teacher, who I was telling you about, she left after having a nervous breakdown one day and didn't come back. And the new teacher, this guy named David Canepa, came in. And he was trained by Operation Push for Excellence in Chicago the summer before. And he was tremendous.
Yeah.
He brought us our very first novels to read. We hadn't read novels up until that point. We had history textbooks from the 1950s, and this was late 70s. He thought that was the craziest thing ever. So when you realize how much has changed, in history at that amount of time.
Right.
So we started reading books about that history to kind of understand things, and it changed the course of my life. He also was the one who suggested that I take this another assessment called the SSAT test, which was the secondary school admissions test, which is like the SAT but for private schools for high school. And I took that test and scored well again. And before too long, scholarship offers started for the private school system, the prep schools, most of which on the East Coast. And so anyway, the power of testing to shape kids' lives, was very compelling to me, and it's been a real lesson that has reasserted itself for me all throughout my career.
I would imagine that, and what your experience was, and how it shaped you as now, a leader of an organization that's trying to influence and help others change and shape their systems to meet every student where they need to be met at and provide what they need to be provided in order to succeed.
Right.
On that note, we're going to switch gears, but we have to take a break first. Coming up in the second part of my discussion with Dr. Derek Mitchell, the CEO of Partners in School Innovation, Derek shares some of the biggest issues we need to tackle as a society.
I think our schools need to be a great deal more reflective of the values of the communities around them. And until we do that, school feels colonial.
This has been They Are Waiting for Us. If you want to learn how to create economic opportunity through equal access to quality education and create an extraordinary learning environment focused on everyone realizing their full potential, go to drlisaandrew.com. They Are Waiting for Us is a production of Forbes Books.